Hello, and welcome to the fourth recording of My Dog Will Eat My Face. Before we get started, I did want to share with my listeners some recent news and some of my first world problems, for lack of a better word. I have no one else to complain to, so you get to hear this recent news of my terrible sandwich that I had for lunch. You see, I live in an apartment building, and downstairs there's this deli place that produces normally really good sandwiches, soup, salads, that kind of stuff. And I called for them to deliver a sandwich to me upstairs. And when I got it, it was supposed to be in French bread, and instead it was in white bread, like the little white bread, typical bread sides that you'd get in a sandwich when your mom would kind of pack your lunch for you in the morning. That's not what I want. That's not what I ordered. So my question is, do I call down and complain? Do I call down and demand a new sandwich? To me, that sounds like a first ticket to allowing that staff down there to do disgusting things to my sandwich before they bring it up to me. So that when I bite into it, it's not going to taste like the nice European sandwich that I ordered, but instead probably a festering pimple of some kind. God. So I don't know if I wanted to do that, but I think my only option is to just lay down and take it and eat the sandwich and eat the lousy bread regardless. So I had to share that. If any of my listeners disagree with my course of action, you can certainly try to find a way to get in touch with me if you go find my podcast on Anchor. Actually, through that venue, you can leave me a voicemail and you can tell me that I'm an idiot for not complaining or not being a man and being a wimp for just eating that sandwich that I did not order. Anyway, in other recent news, more news relating to the podcast, actually. Recently, the podcast was approved as an Apple affiliate. And that's pretty exciting because what that means is that we can share on a website for our listeners opportunities to get different Apple products and solutions. They're not marked up. It's not like a broker deal where they sell to the channel or they sell to the podcast and then we sell to whomever. It's a direct sale to Apple. The podcast is just acting as an affiliate. So if you have Apple products that you are in the market for, there is a website that hopefully will be coming in the next coming few weeks. Knock on wood that it will arrive safe and soundly. And through that, you can actually get those products, and that's an extra just bonus for my listeners to where they can just cut through the tape. They don't have to go through a huge catalog. If they're interested in a specific Apple solution, hopefully they can get it through this podcast website at the same price. And that is a huge benefit actually to this podcast and helps us keep things alive, such as a website, which will have other interesting features. I'm kind of thinking of a daily, hourly update in text for listeners so you can kind of see what's happening as each day goes on, as opposed to just a huge update each week of what happened that week. You kind of get like a sneak peek of my so-called life and see what's going on. So there is some benefits to that to the listeners as well. Even if you're not interested at all in Apple solutions, it's going to be a combined platform that will offer hopefully more opportunities for listeners to reach out to me, not just on Anchor, like I just said earlier, and also offer a direct kind of a window in my day-to-day life and and issues as they come up, because sometimes they don't make it in the podcast. I just don't have the time. But if you go to this page, and it's going to be in a kind of a blog format, hopefully you can get those updates and read about it if you like. And then also, you can link over to Apple Solutions and go shopping. So how cool is that? It's win-win for everybody. So that's something that I'm working on, and that should be coming in hopefully the near future. And so that's actually exciting news. I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to provide more opportunity for my listeners to interact with myself and interact with my day-to-day life, and why not offer them also a chance to purchase Apple products and solutions if they so happen to be in the market. Like I said, it's win-win-win, so it's pretty good news. Now, in this episode, we are going to talk about the emotional and mental stuff, so to speak, that affects a person when they're dying. And I should say a person. This is by far not a universal assessment of what every individual who's dying is going through. Everyone's experience, I think, is different. So in this episode, we're just going to talk about the mental and emotional issues that I have had personally going through this dying experience. And I will explain to you what that's been like. So that's what's coming up today. And I look forward to sharing those particulars with you here in a close moment. Well, first of all, congratulations for surviving that boring introduction. If you made it through that, you deserve a gold star for the day. Before I get started to talk about the real meat of what I wish to share on this podcast. So, kudos to you. Anyway, so this particular segment, or this particular podcast, I should say, is going to talk about the emotional and mental issues that come up with me as I slowly decay and as I basically die. And I want to share, first of all, probably the biggest impact on my life this event has had on me, and that, believe it or not, is isolation. Isolation to me is by far the most severe mental hardship I've had to face in the last few months and years as this has gone on. And what I mean by that are, well, there's things that I've already touched on in other podcasts. I am tied to actually 2 oxygen compressors in my apartment because my liter flow that I need to stay alive is so high I can't even get enough oxygen from 1 oxygen compressor. They have to put 2 in here, and that's usually running anywhere from 12 to 16 to sometimes 18 liters of oxygen. It changes a little bit from day to day, but generally it's 12 to 16. I would say sometimes 18 liters, but that's the oxygen flow that I need. And that's so high that there's no way 1 concentrator could deliver that. Anyway, that being said, I also have emergency oxygen tanks that can deliver 15 liters of oxygen. That's where they max out on. But if I were to try to take one of those and, say, leave the house with it, it would last only 20 minutes, approximately 20 minutes. And that's because my rate is so high that, you know, normal oxygen tanks are never going to be enough for me. I do use them to take the dog out for brief walks. I take him out for basically a 10-minute walk. And that's about it. That's the only thing I really use them for. Because that's really the only thing I can use them for. It'd be impossible for me to go to restaurants and order something or go to a friend's house and hang out. All those things take way more than 20 minutes, I would say. So that's the hardest part of this. It's the isolation. It's the fact that I'm basically now stuck, like on a desert island, I would say, in my apartment. I mean, that's how it is. It's like I'm just by myself in this little apartment. And I do have my dog sometimes. That's another story for another day. But I do have my dog. And, you know, that helps a ton. I'm a lot happier when I'm with my dog. But still, it's very difficult to be isolated from other people. Not being able to go to a restaurant, which was, again, one of my most favorite things in the world. I can't travel. Again, one of my most favorite things in the world. I can't do a lot of things. And basically, I'm limited, stuck in my apartment building. So if you compare that to how I lived life previously, being able to travel, traveling the world, and golly, I actually went to one of those, I don't have no idea what they're called, but they're online. You can like go to a website and you select the states you've lived in, and then it will color in a map for you for which states you've been to. Not lived in, what am I thinking? States you've just been to. And I pulled that up for myself, and it was almost completely filled in. There were just a handful of states, mainly in the deep south and the upper north, like the Dakotas, where I have never been. But otherwise, for the most part, it was all filled in for me. So when it comes to states as well, I've been to the vast majority of U.S. states. And I've been to Europe, I've been to East Asia, I've been to Australia. So there's a lot taken away from me when I'm now suddenly, almost instantly, isolated in this apartment. So that's been a huge, huge drag. And it's not just physical isolation, I would say. There is a lot more to it that is a problem. And from that physical isolation, I will tell you that that's just the beginning, and what leads from it can actually be a lot worse. And I'll get into that here in a couple seconds. Now, one thing I wanted to touch on is the support you might get from friends and family in hospice. And unfortunately, they do not help with the isolation at all. In fact, it's quite the antithesis. What I've experienced is friends and family generally step away from you. They generally back away from talking to you, being with you, and supporting you as you go through the dying process. And it really surprised me, needless to say. I was not expecting that at all. And I asked my caregivers, actually, if that was common, or am I just an a-hole? What could be the case? I'm open to that too. I wouldn't be surprised if I was just a jerk. Maybe that's what's going on. or at least a mix therein. But they said no. Actually, it's quite common. It is very common with people that go into hospice, to where their family actually steps away and no longer supports them. And that's just sad. But it's to be expected if you see people as what they are. If you see people, if you see friends and family as people, I think it's a lot less surprising. Because people are going to behave like people. And there's nothing you can really do about that. So even though they're friends and family and they might have loved you and cared about you, they're going to do what people do. And for the most part, people do not like to talk about death. They hate it. Which is why this podcast, I think, is so unique, in that I talk about death and my demise like I'm talking about, I don't know, the shoes I'm wearing today, or the retail prices of homes in Copa County. I don't know. I talk about it like it's nothing. And I try to do that. I try to be open and honest about what that experience is like. And don't get me wrong, it's really wonderful when friends and family do come in and support you and love you. That is truly, truly amazing. And that probably applies to all my friends and family that are listening to this. So if you're a friend or a family member, don't worry, I'm probably not talking about you, because by the very virtue of you listening to this, I don't think you qualify. So no worries to you guys. But there's a lot of friends and family out there that were different. It was the antithesis. It even became to the point of friends sometimes sharing vulgar and verbally attacking me. Vulgarity, and they were sharing vulgarity, and they were attacking me. Verbally, at least, not physically. You know, I wasn't getting into bar fights again. Yes, I've been in bar fights. So, thankfully, that's not been recurring. But it's surprising. It is really surprising to me that you don't get more from friends and family when you go through this experience. But I think at the end of the day, you just have to realize that they're just people. And you can expect people to behave like people. And everybody listening should probably write that down, and that will probably actually get you through your life as well. You have to expect people to behave like people. So that's been, unfortunately, an isolating, a further isolating, I should say, component to this process of dying, which is sad but real. Now, another area of loss that I've experienced as I decline is honestly intellectual isolation and intellectual loss. And it's really been driven home with me through the loss of, one, my job, for sure. My job was highly cognitive in its nature and very challenging to me on a daily basis. I truly loved it. And I think the lack of work and not working has been a tremendous loss for me when it comes to intellectual isolation. And I think a second area where you experience this loss is the loss of your friendships. The loss of having people to talk to argue with, to debate with, be it even small topics. That kind of loss can be really profound on someone. And it was profound on me. A lot of my friends are very smart. And not being able to see them and not being able to hang out with them and them basically cutting me off from their lives has been a tremendous loss of that intellectual stimulation that I had. Now that speaks for my friends. I mean, if you have friends that spend their time going to the bar, shooting up dope, and getting hookers all day, I would say that they should really give me a call on my phone at... Wait, no, that's not what I meant to say. They shouldn't be expected to provide as much intellectual stimulation as someone else might. And, it's not just friends. It's associates, of course. It's people you might know you're not close to. You can certainly argue with associates. You can certainly argue with people you don't even know. I think we've all learned that the hard way. You can argue with pretty much anybody. And there's some people out there that are more than happy to argue with you about the stupidest of things. So they're right there for the taking. And here's little me behind my apartment window saying, "Give me, give me, give me." And it's just something that I've lost. And I realize I just broke my promise of never doing a high voice again. And for that, I am so sorry. That was a terrible sin on my part. And I do apologize for the high voice again. But anyway, moving on. The intellectual isolation, though, is something that I would say is relatively easy to overcome. At least it has for me. It could really be gained through a lot of different things. I've been a member of a book club which would send me books to read at least monthly, sometimes weekly. And I also buy books on the side that I'm interested in and things that I want to read and expand my knowledge on. I've not lost a sense of that. And now it's come to the point where my home office is pretty much like a library. When you walk in, it is just jammed to the gills with books. And you can kind of make out furniture. You can kind of see there's a chair there. But it's really stuffed with books. If I get any new ones, I have to be really careful. So right now I am actually very, very careful if I want a new book, because I don't know where in the world I will put it. And I think the overflow is actually going to have to start to go out of the office. It actually already started to, and go into my living room. So we'll see. But anyway, books is a great way to continue your intellectual stimulation and to overcome that isolation. So I think books can be a big help. And if you're not a big literary fan, and if you don't like to read, I hate to say this, but there's also YouTube and resources like that. No, I'm not saying YouTube. Go in there and watch cat videos. If you do, I lose all respect for you. I'm kidding, of course, but sometimes it's wholesome to watch a stupid video on YouTube, for sure. But what I mean is it's wrapped to the gills in documentaries and actual full movies that are available, full historical movies. that can teach you a lot about history, a lot of historical films, dramas out there that are based on real events, and just pretty much any topic you want is available to you. You can research everything from the ancient Persian Empire to the origins of toffee. It's just ridiculous. So YouTube and I have become good friends, I would say, in my hospice experience, because of what it's been able to teach me. And resources like it. I actually go to other sites, obviously, not just YouTube, but that's just the example that I know everyone has access to. But there's obviously other sites out there that are not dissimilar and can help you. In fact, in the time that I have been in hospice, I've had a noticeable increase in, for lack of a better word, eureka moments. And there's a pun in there, as you see where this goes. But there's been an increase in those eureka or self-epiphanies that one has, maybe in their own mind. Moments when you basically learn that, among other things, but you might learn that two things that you thought were unrelated are actually connected somehow. And the best example I have of that is from reading the 10 books on architecture by Vitruvius, like everyone has. I'm sure all the listeners here have their 10 books right there handy on their desk, right at the side, ready to go. But I've definitely read all the 10 books at least several times. And one of the things that Vitruvius speaks of in these books is something he calls unseeables, which are basically unseeable, micro things, that microscopic items that are basically the make of everything in the universe. So you certainly have a table and a chair, but within that table and a chair you have microscopic elements per se, and portions that are so small they cannot be seen by the naked human eye. And it is actually those unseeables which are unbreakable, and compose of all matter and everything you see in the universe that really construct that chair and that table in this example. So Vitruvius would talk about the unseeables in the universe, to where, these are microscopic things that are unbreakable and are the lowest form of a solid form, so to speak, and they produce everything that you see around you. So I learned recently that the Greek word for unseeable is atom. So not Adam, like a boy's name, atom. And I thought, oh my gosh, Vitruvius was talking about atoms, because at the time when I read this, I thought, holy smokes, this looks like here the Romans have their own atomic theory being developed. That's amazing. I never knew that the Romans had that going on. Wow. Now I learned later, yeah, they certainly had an atomic theory. They had that going on, so to speak, through this mention of unseeables, but they got that from the Greeks, which had it before them, to some extent. They extrapolated on it, the Romans did, but the origin they got from the Greeks. This is common for a lot of things Romans do in the world. So it just blew me away, to where Vitruvius in his writings was discussing unseeables which was actually atoms. And the only reason why this book that I happen to have, this copy that I happen to have of Vitruvius's 10 Books on Architecture, was the way the English was translated. The English was translated to unseeable, whereas it could have very well or just as well been printed as atom, which is the original Greek word for unseeable. And so they were talking about the same darn thing. And so for me, that was a eureka moment. That's why it's a pun, because there's Greeks in it. I know, it's a dad joke. Bear with me. Anyway, but it was really fascinating to me to put those two things together. And there's been moments like that throughout my time in hospice where I've had more time, in fact, to expend for my own intellectual gain. And I suddenly learned, this is related to this, which is related to that. And that's related to this, and that also relates to whatever. And to me, that's just fun. That's my brain having fun. I don't know if everyone's brain thinks that's fun. They might think that's homework. But to me, it's fun. So, it's, in a lot of sense, I've definitely had a solid maintenance, so to speak, of my intellectual standing despite this horrid isolation that has come with my slow demise. So before I close out this particular podcast, I do want to break down the services that one might normally expect from hospice once you're in hospice. I share this because, well, for one, it's part of my normal day, or at least my normal week, I should say. And also, perhaps it might be a good resource for someone who might be entering hospice for the first time and don't know what the heck to expect. This breakdown is something I actually sought out when I first joined hospice, and for whatever reason I had a hard time actually finding it. It had to be explained to me multiple times, and it was a little bit of a learning experience for sure. So my goal here is just to kind of lay out the land of what you get in hospice with your team, and what you can expect from them. So your team is basically a group of individuals who are assigned to you and your well-being. And it's a collection of several people, like maybe half a dozen people, something like that. And they certainly have other patients. Their focus is not entirely on you, but frankly, a lot of it is. I mean, they're supposed to give you, they're supposed to give you kind of that kind of unyielding attention, as though it were so that you were their only patient. I mean, that might be a long shot, and if they heard me saying this, they'd probably slap me for saying something like that. But they do actually really try to drive home good service and pay attention to you. So long as you're reasonable. I mean, you're not, Lothar in the refrigerator commanding them on what to do. You're just another patient. But they will listen to you and they will try to help you, so long as, again, as you're reasonable with your expectations. So the team is broken down in the following way. The first individual you're going to come across, and probably the one you're going to deal with most often, is the nurse. My nurse comes to me at this point once a week. I think as you degrade, you get more frequent nurse visits, but in my case, I'm still somewhat functioning, and therefore she sees me once a week. Now, whether or not I'm functioning or not might be open to some debate, but in their view, I'm fairly okay enough to only be seen that often. So she comes by only once a week. In fact, I think all my guys come by only once a week. Anyway, but yeah, she in my case comes not that often, and what she'll do is just not a lot, frankly. I should say he too. There's male nurses. He or she will take your vitals, essentially, ask how you're feeling, ask if there's anything new to report, because the dying process is just that. It's a process. New things come up as you go through it. And at first I got really annoyed when they kept calling my death a process. Like they were discussing something like, I don't know, how to make a good martini or something like that. That's a process, you know. Don't put in too much vermouth, and this is some immunology. I don't know. That's a process, but my dying, I was quite offended when they called it a process. But having been in it for a little while now, it is a process. I mean, when I joined hospice, I was on 3 liters of oxygen, and I had very little else to report to them. Now I'm on as much as easily 16 liters of oxygen, and sometimes even 18 liters if I'm not doing well. So that's certainly gotten worse, and so I've had to update them as my breathing gets worse, and then they increase my oxygen flow. And that's been a huge support point from them for me. And also if other things come up, incontinence was one of my things that came up. So they literally gave me, oh God, I can't believe I'm saying this to the world. They gave me basically pee pads to put in my bed, and if I so wanted, access to a male diaper. Or, yeah, it was a male diaper, male adult diaper, I should say. And those just sit quietly in my walk-in closet right now. I'm too prideful to put something like that on. God, I should put it on and go to a costume party and get a great big lollipop or something. Freak everyone out. That might be good. But so anyway, as things happen, as you deteriorate, so to speak, you update the nurse, and she will connect you with medications, with medication changes, with additional services that you might need. And my current nurse is a real trip. She's really funny. She's a steadfast worker. She's an incredible working bee, and she's actually from Kazakhstan and has a really good thick accent. And I have fun with her, talking to her in Russian when she comes over, because I do know some Russian. And we sometimes just have fun with that. But yeah, she's kind of a trip. It's just, this Kazakhstani nurse. And I've got to withhold all the Borat jokes as much as possible, so those aren't allowed. Secondly, you're going to have a CNA. What the heck does that stand for? Certified Nurse Assistant, I think? Yeah, that's it. They're bizarre. I do have one. Um, they can come often. Yeah, they can come. They can come over. Wow, that's a tie twister. They can come over more often than once a week. Mine comes just once a week. As you deteriorate, it's definitely likely that they will come over more often. Their big shtick is giving you a shower and bathing you, it seems. Um, which I don't need. When I take a shower, at this point in my struggle, I'm able to give myself a shower. Yay! So, with that said, I don't need her for the shower. But every time I see her, it's just like she's stuck on it. Do you want a shower? Do you want a shower? Did you take care of that? And she would look at me face to face and say, have you taken a shower today? And I said, usually that's a big insult. And she said, no, I'm not. I don't mean it like that. I mean, do I need to give you a shower? I'm like, no, I've taken a shower. Thank you. So, the CNAs are kind of goofy, but they do other things as well. And when she comes over, she helps me with, what does she help me with? Oh, taking out the trash. Heavy objects are difficult for me, and taking out the garbage can be a real pain and involve heavy objects. So she does that for me. She takes out the trash, and she also collects my mail, because my mail's about one city block away on the other side of the building. And so for me to get there and back, I'd have to walk 2 city blocks, which for me is like virtually the same as climbing Mount Everest. Then you got the social worker, and they're supposed to help with things like paperwork, housing, disability paperwork, things of that nature. In my case, though, I've kind of bogarted my social worker as my counselor, for lack of a better word. I actually tell them about my problems, what I'm going through, what's it like, and talk to them about emotional issues and things like that. And the reason why I use my social worker for that is because right now I don't really need any help with paperwork. Now, if I do need work with some, or if I do need help with some paperwork, I definitely go to them. But the reason why I use them mainly as a counselor is because they don't have counselors. I mean, at least this hospice company doesn't. They, and it shocks me, they don't have trained counselors available to their patients. Instead, they have a chaplain, and as best as I can tell, they're brain dead. I'm sorry, but they just sit there and they stare at me when I talk. Obviously, I am an atheist, so what would I be doing talking to a chaplain? But all the hospice folks were like, oh no, they're good. They'll talk to anyone, any faith, even the atheists. They're good with that. So I thought I'd give them a try. Give it a couple different ones a try, and they were consistent. They would just kind of stare at me and be brain dead, and really didn't do anything. They wouldn't talk back. They wouldn't offer advice. They wouldn't have a conversation. They would just stare at me like, I don't know, Land of the Dead or I don't know, something like that. It's terrifying, but I don't see the chaplain at all, needless to say. And then finally, you got the doctor or the MP or nurse practitioner. I rarely ever see them. They handle all your prescriptions because they have to. They're the prescribing doctors. So your nurse talks to them about your medications, and if there needs to be a change, they have to go to them to make the change. So they handle all the RX, and they handle your certification for hospice overall with Medicare. So basically, after a period of time, if you've been in hospice for a while, they have to recertify you and say, oh, you're still near death. and basically send that to the government. And so that's one of the gigs they do. But they're kind of like the Wizard of Oz. You never really see them, and they do these magical things like bring drugs to your door or make things happen that you see no mechanism, you see no cogs in the machine, and it's just done through this Dr. RMP. And so that's why I say they're like the Wizard of Oz. You never really see them. But you do know they exist. They do exist. So, that's actually about it. That's the entire hospice team. As far as I know of, there might be different companies out there that have different roles for different titles or something else, because hospice companies are just that. They're companies. They're all independent. They're all individuals. I just had a flashback to Life of Brian there. I'm sorry. But they're all individual entities. And, so they can all be different. They can all be different is what I'm saying. But at least in my case, that's what I deal with. So the nurse and the CNA once a week is really it. And the social worker when I want someone to bitch at. That's pretty much it. So one might say that everything that I've shared today is an amalgamation that turns into a emotional blob of fetid, stinky goo. God knows what to deal with. But I hope not. I've had to deal with it, and I've had to find ways to cope with a lot of this. First off, with coping with the losses of some of my favorite things and some of the people in my life. I've learned that a good person in many cases can be replaced by a good book or a good hobby or a good animal. I often say my favorite person is my dog, and I mean it sincerely. Now, I know he's not a human. Our best conversations are about sausages and bowel movements, and I tend to do most of the talking. I promise not to share those conversations with you guys. But it's amazing what an animal can do for you. And he truly is my best friend. And he gets me through a lot each day. More so than, I would say, the friends who had left me. And I further cannot fret about the things that I've had. As I think about it, I can't help but consider the old quote. I think it was Marcus Aurelius who said, "We live only now. Everything else is either past or unknown." And I think that translates to the living in the moment theory that you see pushed everywhere in psychiatrist's office and stuff like that. You got to live in the moment. That's the key to happiness. And that's being pushed a lot these days. So if your shrink tries to tell you that and try to tell you that, oh, they learned it in this book, the key to happiness, living in the moment, you could tell them they're an idiot and the Greeks thought of it first, thousands of years beforehand. Then you can whip out your Marcus Aurelius quote and make them feel stupid. That's what I do. So anyway, no, but in all seriousness, that is, I think, a good way of thinking about the present and living in it. So you don't fret about things in the past. There's things that just don't exist. And the future is just simply unknown. And I'll end this podcast fairly quickly here because it's been rather long, and I'm sorry. You could probably hear my voice is going. But I'm going to end with the fact that I can't fret about the isolation. I've often repeated to myself a saying by Ibsen, and I would repeat this quote by him to myself for decades, for years and years. This is not old to me. This is not a new thing. Truth be granted. It's a phrase I've said to myself through isolation and loneliness throughout my whole life. I think since I was, not my whole life, but since I was a teenager, certainly. And I'll leave you with this quote by Ibsen that helped me through all those years and is indeed helping me still now get through the pain and the loss that I'm feeling. And that quote is simply, "The strongest man in the world is he who stands most alone."